Her name was Victoria Hale, and at 38 she had everything most people dream of: a corner office on the 42nd floor of a glass building in Manhattan, a penthouse with a view of Central Park, a wardrobe full of designer clothes that never repeated twice in public appearances, and a voice that could silence entire rooms with just a glance. But none of that was with her on that bench. What was with her was the weight of a phone call she'd received 2 hours earlier, the kind that breaks something inside that can never be fully repaired. Her father had passed away, not suddenly, not without warning. She had known for months that his heart was failing, that each visit to the hospital might be the last. But knowing doesn't prepare you. Nothing truly prepares you for the moment when someone says the words and they become real. She had left the office without explanation, something she never did, walked 15 blocks without feeling her feet touch the ground, and ended up in that park. Because her legs simply refused to carry her any further. The tears came before she could stop them, hot and angry and full of everything she had never allowed herself to feel during business hours. And then that little voice appeared, so small, so certain, so completely unafraid of approaching a stranger who was falling apart in public. Victoria looked at the child through blurred vision. This tiny girl with dark curls escaping from 2 crooked pigtails, wearing a yellow dress with a grass stain on the knee and sneakers that lit up when she moved. The teddy bear in her arms had one eye missing and stuffing coming out of one seam, but the way she held it, protective and loving, made it clear that Bear was the most valuable thing in her world. "You can borrow my dad," the girl repeated, and this time Victoria heard not just the words but the complete sincerity behind them. This wasn't pity, this was generosity in its purest form, the kind that sees someone hurting and offers the best thing you have. Without counting the cost, Victoria's throat tightened even more. She wanted to say something, anything, but the words stuck somewhere between her chest and her mouth. The man the girl had pointed to was now walking closer, concern clear on his face, but also caution, as if he wasn't sure whether to interrupt this strange moment his daughter had created. He was tall, maybe early 40s, wearing jeans and a simple navy sweater, dark hair slightly messy from the wind, and eyes that looked genuinely kind. Not the calculated kindness Victoria saw in corporate meetings, but the real thing. "Emma," he said softly, kneeling down beside his daughter, "you can't just offer to lend people your dad's sweetheart." "But she's crying," Emma said simply, as if that explained everything. And in her world, maybe it did. The man looked up at Victoria, then really looked at her, and she saw something flicker across his face. Recognition maybe, or just basic human compassion for someone clearly going through something terrible. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "She has a very big heart and sometimes it gets ahead of her manners." Victoria finally found her voice, though it came out rough and broken. "No," she managed. "No, she's perfect." His name was James Morrison, and he was not supposed to be in that park at all. The original plan had been to take Emma to her gymnastics class across town, but she had begged him that morning to skip it just this once, to go to the park instead, to feed the ducks and play on the swings and just have a regular afternoon like they used to before life got so scheduled. James had said yes because he always had trouble saying no to those big brown eyes, and also because deep down he knew Emma was right. They had been running from activity to activity lately, forgetting to just be together without a plan. So there they were, Emma with her inseparable teddy bear she had named Professor Buttons for reasons only a 6-year-old could understand, and James with a bag of breadcrumbs they weren't technically supposed to feed to the ducks but did anyway. They had been at the pond when Emma suddenly went very still, that particular kind of still that meant she had noticed something important. "Daddy," she had whispered, tugging on his sleeve, "that lady is crying." James followed her gaze to a woman on a bench about 50 feet away, her posture collapsed inward, shoulders shaking slightly. "People cry sometimes, sweetheart," he said gently. "It's okay to be sad." But Emma's face had taken on that determined expression she got when she had decided something needed fixing. Before James could stop her, she was already walking toward the bench, Professor Buttons clutched to her chest like a talisman. By the time he caught up, Emma had already made her offer, and the woman was staring at his daughter with an expression James couldn't quite read, somewhere between shock and something that looked almost like awe. Now, standing there with this stranger's grief hanging in the air between them, James felt completely out of his depth. He was a pediatric nurse, he dealt with sick children and worried parents every day, but this felt different somehow, more raw, more personal. Victoria wiped at her face with the back of her hand, trying to pull herself together, years of executive training fighting against the fact that she was completely breaking down in public. "I should go," she said, starting to stand. "Wait," Emma said, and there was such earnest concern in her small voice that Victoria actually stopped. "Professor Buttons thinks you should sit back down." Despite everything, Victoria felt the corner of her mouth twitch, not quite a smile but almost. "Professor Buttons?" Emma held up the teddy bear, making him nod. "He's very smart," she said seriously. "He knows when people need to sit down." James cleared his throat. "We don't want to intrude," he said, "but if you need a minute or I don't know if there's anything we can do." His voice trailed off because really, what could they do, two strangers in a park, for a woman who looked like her entire world had just collapsed? But Victoria surprised herself by sitting back down, not because she had a plan but because she suddenly couldn't imagine standing up again. Emma immediately climbed onto the bench beside her, not touching her but close enough that Victoria could feel the warmth of her small body. "When I'm sad," Emma announced, "Daddy lets me have hot chocolate with extra marshmallows and we watch cartoons and he doesn't make me do my homework right away." "Emma," James said, a hint of amusement in his warning tone. "What, it's true?" Victoria found herself almost laughing, a strange, broken sound. "That sounds like a very good plan. Do you like hot chocolate?" Emma asked. I'm not sure I remember." It was true, Victoria couldn't recall the last time she'd had hot chocolate, probably decades, back when she was younger than Emma, back when her father would make it for her on cold winter nights, before she learned that successful people don't waste time on such simple pleasures. The thought of her father made fresh tears spring to her eyes. Emma noticed immediately. "Professor Button says it's okay to cry," she said softly. "Tears are just feelings that couldn't stay inside anymore." James looked at his daughter with surprise. "Where did you hear that?" "You told me that, Daddy, when Mommy went to heaven and I cried every day for a whole week." The words hung in the air. Victoria turned to look at James properly for the first time, really look at him, and saw the shadow of old grief in his eyes, the kind that has learned to coexist with joy but never fully disappears. "I'm sorry," Victoria whispered. "It was 3 years ago," James said quietly. "Cancer, it was very fast." "I lost my father today," Victoria heard herself say, and saying it out loud made it real in a way it hadn't been before, made it something she could no longer pretend hadn't happened. Emma's hand slipped into hers, so small and warm and certain. "That's the saddest thing," she said. "Losing your daddy, that means you need to borrow mine extra much." James sat down on Victoria's other side, keeping a respectful distance but present. "My daughter is right," he said gently. "That is the saddest thing." They sat there for a while, the three of them, watching the afternoon light shift through the trees, listening to the park breathe around them. Victoria felt something loosening in her chest, not the grief that would stay but the terrible isolation of it, the feeling that she had to carry it alone. "I should have been there," she finally said, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "I should have been at the hospital but I was in a meeting, a stupid meeting about quarterly projections that didn't matter at all, and by the time I got there he was already gone." "He knew you loved him," James said with quiet certainty. "How could he know? I barely visited, I was always too busy, always one more deal to close, one more crisis to manage." "Did he know you loved him?" James asked again, gentler this time. Victoria thought about it, really thought about it. Her father had never questioned her choices, had supported her through business school, had been proud when she made CO, had told her every time they spoke that he loved her. "Yes," she whispered, "yes, he knew." "Then that's what matters." Emma squeezed her hand. "Daddy says love isn't about how much time you spend together, it's about what's in your heart, and hearts are very big, they can hold love even when people are far away." Victoria looked down at this wise little girl with her missing-eyed teddy bear and her crooked pigtails and felt something crack open inside her. Not breaking but opening, making room for this unexpected kindness. "How did you get so smart?" she asked. Emma grinned. "Professor Buttons teaches me things." The sun was starting to dip lower, painting the park in shades of gold and amber, and James knew he should probably get Emma home. There was dinner to make and bath time and the whole evening routine. But something kept him there on that bench, watching his daughter comfort this stranger with the unself-conscious grace only children possess. Victoria had gone quiet, staring at her hands, at the expensive watch on her wrist that had probably cost more than James made in 3 months, at the rings that marked her success. "I don't know how to do this," she said finally, so quietly James almost didn't hear. "Do what?" "Grieve. I don't know how to just stop, how to not be productive, how to feel things without it being a waste of time." The words sounded hollow even as she said them, the kind of thinking that had driven her entire adult life suddenly revealed as desperately inadequate. James was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "When Sarah died," he said, "Emma's mom, I tried to keep going like normal, thought if I just maintained the routine, went to work, took care of Emma, did all the practical things, then I wouldn't fall apart. What happened? I fell apart anyway," he said with a sad smile. 3 weeks later, right in the middle of the hospital cafeteria, just completely lost it over a tray of terrible meatloaf. Despite everything, Victoria felt that almost laugh again. "But then something changed," James continued. I realized grief wasn't something to get through efficiently, it wasn't a problem to solve, it was love with nowhere to go, and I had to let it go somewhere, even if that somewhere was messy and unproductive and took as long as it took. Emma had been listening quietly, and now she leaned against Victoria's arm. Daddy cried a lot, she said matter-of-factly, and I cried too, and sometimes we cried together and sometimes we cried at different times, and that was okay. But how did you keep going? Victoria asked, genuinely wanting to know. One thing at a time, James said simply. One morning, one meal, one breath, and then one day you realize you're still here, you're still alive, and that matters. Victoria felt the tears coming again, but this time she didn't try to stop them. Emma patted her hand like she had seen adults do. It's okay, she said. Cry as much as you need. Professor Button says tears make flowers grow in your heart. Does he now? James said, unable to hide his smile. Yes, he's very smart about hearts. They sat there as Victoria cried, really cried, the way she hadn't let herself cry in years, maybe ever. Not the careful, controlled tears she had allowed herself in private moments, but the deep, wrenching sobs that come from a place beyond words. James didn't try to stop her or comfort her with platitudes. He just sat there, present and steady, occasionally handing her tissues from a pack Emma had produced from her small backpack. When the worst of it passed, Victoria felt emptied out, exhausted but somehow lighter. Thank you, she managed, her voice hoarse. You don't have to thank us, James said. But I do. I can't remember the last time anyone just sat with me without wanting something, without an agenda. The words revealed more than she meant them to, the loneliness of her position, the isolation of success. James looked at her with understanding. It's hard at the top, isn't it? Impossible, Victoria admitted. Everyone wants something, every conversation is strategic, every relationship is networking. I can't remember the last time someone just saw me. We see you, Emma said with absolute certainty. And somehow, coming from this 6-year-old child, it was the most profound thing anyone had ever said to Victoria. What's your name? Emma asked suddenly. Victoria. That's a pretty name, it sounds like a queen. I suppose it does. Are you a queen? James started to interrupt, but Victoria stopped him. Something like that, she said. I run a big company. What kind of company? We make technology, computers and phones and things like that. Emma's eyes went wide. You make phones? That's so cool. My daddy says I can't have a phone until I'm 13 because I need to learn to use my words and my imagination first. Your daddy sounds very wise. He is, Emma said loyally. He knows everything. Well, not everything. He doesn't know why dinosaurs died, but nobody knows that for sure, not even Professor Buttons. Victoria found herself smiling, really smiling for the first time since that phone call. I think an asteroid killed the dinosaurs. That's the main theory, Emma said, her vocabulary impressive for her age, but there could have been other factors like volcanic activity and climate change. James shrugged at Victoria's surprised expression. She watches a lot of documentaries. I love learning things, Emma explained. Daddy says you can never know too much. He's right about that too. They fell into easier conversation then, Emma asking questions about Victoria's work with genuine curiosity, not the calculated interest of adults trying to network but real childhood wonder at what adults do all day. Victoria found herself explaining things she hadn't thought about in years, remembering why she had fallen in love with technology in the first place, back before it became about market share and quarterly earnings. So you help people talk to each other even when they're far away? Emma summarized. Yes, I suppose that's exactly what we do. That's important, Emma said seriously, because sometimes people you love are far away and you need to tell them things. Like your grandparents? Victoria guessed. They live in Oregon, Emma confirmed, and we video call them every Sunday and I show them my drawings and they show me their garden. That sounds lovely. It is. Daddy says family is important even when they're not close by. Victoria felt the grief rise up again, but gentler this time. Your daddy is right about a lot of things. James cleared his throat, looking slightly embarrassed. I should probably stop her before she makes me sound like some kind of wisdom guru. I'm just trying my best like everyone else. You're doing better than most, Victoria said, and meant it. Emma had started to yawn, the excitement of the afternoon catching up with her. We should get you home, James said, checking his watch. Victoria felt a sudden panic at the thought of them leaving, of being alone again. Emma must have seen it on her face. Will you be okay? She asked with concern. Victoria opened her mouth to say yes automatically, the way she always did, but stopped herself. I don't know, she admitted, but I think I'll be better than I was before I met you. Do you have people? James asked quietly, someone to be with tonight? Victoria thought about her empty penthouse, About her phone full of contacts but empty of friends. Not really, no. That's not good, Emma said firmly. Nobody should be alone when they're sad. Emma, James started but she cut him off. Daddy, she needs people. You said people need people, especially when things are hard. James looked at Victoria, clearly wrestling with something. This is going to sound strange, he said carefully, and please feel free to say no, but would you like to have dinner with us? Nothing fancy, just pasta and probably too much garlic bread, but you shouldn't be alone tonight. Victoria's first instinct was to refuse, to retreat back into her carefully controlled world where vulnerability was weakness and accepting help meant owing someone. But then she looked at Emma's hopeful face, at James's genuine concern, and found herself saying yes. So that's how she ended up in James Morrison's modest apartment in Brooklyn, so different from her Manhattan penthouse it might as well have been a different planet. The space was small but warm, filled with Emma's drawings on the refrigerator, photographs covering every surface, a worn couch that had clearly seen better days but looked infinitely more comfortable than Victoria's designer furniture. Sorry about the mess, James said, quickly gathering toys from the living room floor. It's not messy, Victoria said and realized she meant it. It's lived in. There's a difference. Emma had run ahead to her room, insisting she needed to show Victoria something important. She's very excited, James said, moving into the kitchen. We don't have many visitors. Why not? He shrugged, pulling out a pot to boil water. I work a lot, odd hours at the hospital, and Emma's schedule is pretty packed with school and activities. There's not much time for a social life. I understand that. I suppose you would, he said, glancing at her, though I imagine our reasons are different. Maybe not as different as you think. Emma came bounding back, carrying a large scrapbook. I want to show you pictures of my mommy, she announced. James looked uncertain. Emma, maybe Victoria doesn't. I'd like to see them, Victoria said softly. So they sat on that worn couch, Emma between them, turning pages of a life Victoria had never known. Sarah Morrison had been beautiful, dark-haired and bright-smiled, captured in countless moments of joy. That's at our wedding, James said quietly, pointing to a photo of them both laughing mid-dance. She looks happy. We both were. And that's when I was born, Emma said, showing a picture of Sarah in a hospital bed, exhausted and radiant, holding a tiny bundle. You were early, James explained. We weren't expecting you for another month, but you had other plans. I was impatient, Emma said. You still are, James said fondly. They turned more pages, birthday parties and holidays, ordinary moments elevated by love. And then the pictures changed, became less frequent, Sarah's face thinner, her smile more fragile. That's when she got sick, Emma said matter-of-factly. She lost her hair from the medicine. In the photos, Sarah wore colorful scarves and baseball caps, still smiling even as her body failed. She was so brave, James said quietly. She was, Emma agreed. She told me that being sick didn't mean she stopped being my mommy, that love was stronger than anything, even dying. Victoria felt tears on her face again. She sounds like she was an amazing person. She was, James said, she was my best friend. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of loss heavy in the room but somehow bearable because it was shared. Your dad, James said eventually, what was he like? Victoria found herself talking, really talking, not the polished anecdotes she gave at networking events but the real memories. Her father teaching her to ride a bike, patient through every fall. Her father at her college graduation, crying openly with pride. Her father visiting her first tiny apartment, helping her assemble furniture with terrible instructions. He believed in me, she said finally, even when I didn't believe in myself. He always knew I could do more than I thought possible. That's a good dad, Emma said. The best. Then you're lucky, Emma said, because even though he died, you got to have the best dad, and that's better than having an okay dad forever. The simple wisdom of it struck Victoria silent. James smiled sadly. She said something similar to me after Sarah died, told me she was glad she got to have her mommy at all, even if it wasn't for very long. I learned that from you, Daddy. Did you? Yes, you said we should be grateful for the love we had instead of angry about the love we lost. I was probably trying to convince myself as much as you. Did it work? Victoria asked. Eventually, James said, some days more than others. The water had started boiling and James got up to make dinner, moving around the small kitchen with practiced efficiency. Emma helped, standing on a stool to stir the sauce, narrating everything she was doing like a cooking show host. And now we add the secret ingredient, she said dramatically, sprinkling in oregano, which is love, but also oregano. Daddy says you can't have pasta without oregano. Victoria found herself laughing, really laughing at this little girl's performance. "You're a natural," she said. "Thank you, I practice." Dinner was simple but delicious, eaten at a small table that wobbled slightly. Emma kept up a steady stream of conversation, asking Victoria questions about her childhood, her work, her favorite color, and whether she liked dogs or cats better. "I've never had a pet," Victoria admitted. Emma looked scandalized. "Never, not even a fish. Not even a fish. That's so sad. Pets are important, they love you no matter what." "Emma's been campaigning for a dog for 2 years, James explained. "Daddy says we'll get one when I'm responsible enough." "Which means when I'm responsible enough to handle all the work of having a dog," James corrected. "But I promise I'll help." "That's what they all say." After dinner, Emma insisted Victoria needed to see her room, which turned out to be an explosion of color and creativity. Drawings covered every wall, elaborate worlds populated by fantastic creatures. "Did you make all of these?" Victoria asked, genuinely impressed. "Yes, I like to draw. Daddy says I get it from my mommy, she was an artist." "She was a graphic designer," James clarified, leaning in the doorway, "worked for an ad agency downtown." "She made beautiful things," Emma said, "and I'm going to make beautiful things too." "I think you already are." Emma beamed. It was getting late, past Emma's bedtime, and Victoria knew she should leave, let them get back to their routine. But Emma had other ideas. "Can Victoria read me a story?" she asked James. "I'm sure Victoria has things to do." But Victoria found herself saying, "I'd love to." So she sat on the edge of Emma's small bed, reading from a worn copy of a fairy tale. Emma snuggled under her covers with Professor Buttons. Halfway through, Emma's eyes started to drift closed. "Victoria," she murmured sleepily, "thank you for borrowing my daddy. Thank you for lending him to me. You can borrow him anytime you need to. That's very kind. We're friends now, that's what friends do." Victoria felt her throat tighten. "Yes, we're friends." Emma fell asleep mid-story, her breathing evening out, face peaceful. Victoria carefully closed the book and stood to leave, but Emma's hand caught hers. "Don't be sad alone," she whispered without opening her eyes. "Promise?" "I promise." James walked Victoria to the door, both of them speaking quietly to not wake Emma. "Thank you for tonight," Victoria said. "I don't know what I would have done if—" "You would have been fine," James said gently. "You're stronger than you think." "I don't feel strong." "Nobody does, not when they're grieving, but you are. Strength isn't about not falling apart, it's about putting yourself back together afterward." Victoria realized she didn't want to leave, didn't want to go back to her empty apartment. "I should give you my number," she heard herself say, in case Emma wants to check on me." James smiled, knowing that excuse for what it was, but he pulled out his phone anyway. "I think Emma would like that." They exchanged numbers, and Victoria found herself stalling, looking around the apartment one more time. "This was the best evening I've had in years," she admitted. "Even though you were grieving?" "Maybe because I was grieving, because I got to just be human, be sad, be myself without having to perform." "You're welcome back anytime," James said. "Really, I mean that. I might take you up on that." "Please do." Victoria finally made herself leave, but as she rode the subway back to Manhattan, she felt different. The grief was still there, heavy and real, but it was no longer quite so isolating. She had a friend, or maybe 2 friends, if you counted the 6-year-old with the philosophical teddy bear. And that was something. 3 weeks later, Victoria found herself back at that same park, same bench, but everything was different now. She came every Saturday, meeting James and Emma for what had become their routine. They'd feed the ducks, despite the signs, and Emma would tell elaborate stories about their duck lives, giving them names and personalities and complex relationship dramas. "That one is definitely plotting against the Duck King," she'd say seriously, pointing to a particularly aggressive mallard. James and Victoria would laugh, and slowly, conversation by conversation, they'd been building something neither of them had expected to find. Not romance, not exactly, but something equally valuable. Friendship, understanding, the comfort of being seen by someone who knew what loss looked like. Victoria had started leaving work earlier, taking calls while walking instead of sitting at her desk. Her assistant had noticed, everyone had noticed, but nobody dared comment on the fact that the CEO smiled more these days. On the bench beside her, Emma leaned against her arm, Professor Buttons in her lap. "Are you still sad about your daddy?" she asked quietly. "Sometimes," Victoria said honestly, "but less than before." "That's good, that means the flowers are growing." "What flowers?" "In your heart, remember, the ones tears make." Victoria pulled the little girl close. "You're right, they're growing." And somehow, impossibly, it was true.